At the end of the 1940s, Europe had still not recovered from the ruins of the Second World War, and a new threat was already looming over the continent: the Cold War. The Soviet Union was actively increasing its tank power, and one of the most terrifying symbols of this strength became the heavy tank IS-3. Its sloped armor, which made the vehicle almost invulnerable to most shells of that time, and its powerful 122mm gun deeply impressed Western military analysts. When Soviet tanks marched in a parade in Berlin, demonstrating their might, real alarm spread through NATO headquarters. It became clear, if it came to open war, ordinary medium tanks, such as the American Pershings or the British Cromwells, might not be enough. A machine was needed that could oppose the Soviet giants at long range. This is how the idea of the British heavy tank was born, which would later receive the name Conqueror. When the prototype of Conqueror first rolled onto the proving ground, everyone who saw it froze in admiration and astonishment. It was literally a moving fortress, a true steel monster weighing almost 65 tons. The enormous turret, massive hull with thick armor, and the long barrel of the 120mm L1 gun. All of this created an impression of invincibility. At that moment, the L1 gun was one of the most powerful in the world. It fired armor-piercing sub-caliber shells with a detachable sabot, which penetrated the armor of Soviet tanks at distances unreachable for most guns of that era. This meant that while the crew of an enemy tank was only trying to spot the target through the sight, a shell from the Conqueror would already be flying toward it at a speed of over 4,600 feet per second. A distance of 2 kilometers was a comfortable working range for this gun. The hull and turret were protected by armor so thick that even Soviet 122mm shells could not always penetrate it with the first shot. But the real secret advantage of the Conqueror was not only its brute strength, but also its fire control system, advanced for its time. British engineers did what at that moment seemed revolutionary. The tank commander received a separate sight with independent stabilization, which allowed him to quickly scan the battlefield, detect targets, and instantly pass them to the gunner. While the gunner was firing at one target, the commander was already searching for the next one. In real combat conditions, such an advantage could become decisive. The enemy was only trying to orient itself in the chaos, while the Conqueror was already managing to fire several accurate shots. The electronics and optics of that time were far from modern digital systems, but for the 1950s, this was a true breakthrough. The tank could fire effectively even while moving, although not too fast, and the crew of 5 worked like one coordinated mechanism. This advantage made the Conqueror not just a heavy tank, but a true machine of domination. However, as often happens with such powerful machines, strength has its price. And in the case of the Conqueror, that price was truly enormous. The tank weighed more than 65 tons, and this made it extremely slow. Maximum road speed barely reached 22 miles per hour, and on rough terrain it dropped even lower. The engine, although powerful, devoured huge amounts of fuel, and maintaining such a giant required an entire team of mechanics and special equipment. Bridges in Europe often simply could not withstand its weight, so moving the Conqueror across territory became a separate logistical operation, requiring prior reconnaissance and reinforcement of crossings. Transportation by rail was also a challenge, because not every railcar could support it. It was precisely because of these shortcomings that the Conqueror disappeared from the view of the military as quickly as it had appeared. While the tank was only beginning to enter service, the world of tank building was already experiencing a real revolution. The division into light, medium, and heavy tanks was being replaced by a new concept: the universal main battle tank. Britain already had in its arsenal the Centurion, which had proven its effectiveness in Korea and the Middle East. It was faster, cheaper to produce and maintain. but at the same time almost as dangerous to the enemy, thanks to the successful combination of armor, firepower, and mobility. Later, even more modern machines appeared, such as the Chieftain, which finally secured this trend. Giants like the Conqueror began to lose their meaning. Why maintain a heavy, expensive, and slow-moving machine if one modern main battle tank could perform the same tasks more effectively and more cheaply? Production of the Conqueror did not last long. From 1955 to 1959, a relatively small number of vehicles were produced, and already at the beginning of the 1960s, they began to be withdrawn from service. The era of steel giants was ending. The world was moving toward new wars where speed, maneuverability, and versatility were more important than pure mass and armor thickness. Although the service of the Conqueror was short, it entered history as a true legend, the last heavy tank of the British Army. Today, these vehicles can be seen in armored vehicle museums around the world. From the Tank Museum, where one of the best preserved examples stands, to private collections and even some Eastern European museums. They remind us of how tense the Cold War was and how seriously countries were preparing for a possible clash. The Conqueror almost never fought in real battles. It did not take part in any major war, did not fire at a living enemy, and left no trail of burning ruins behind it. But sometimes the most terrifying weapon is precisely the one the enemy sees, knows exists, and hopes never to meet in battle. The Conqueror became exactly such a deterrent factor. Its presence in the ranks of British forces forced Soviet strategists to think carefully whether it was worth risking their IS tanks and T-10 in a direct clash. It was a symbol of Britain's readiness for the worst-case scenario. And in this, perhaps, lies its greatest victory, to remain in history not as a machine that destroyed, but as a machine that prevented destruction.